we have just talked about you. We know your ears were burning. And now I know you have a presentation that you want to show. But maybe you want to tell us a little bit about yourself. We know more about you than we do about Heather, so maybe you could tell us and share about Heather too, because I know she's had some great success.
So we've been married for 25 years. I grew up in Alden also with Tim, and we started dating very young. I don't know what else you want
me to say.
Oh, sorry. I have a commercial cleaning business. I clean during the week.
Okay, so thank you guys so much for having me. I really, I kind of wish we could be in Florida there with you, but we have such nice weather in Buffalo. I would hate to leave this ice cold weather to come down to warm Florida. So thank you guys so much for having us. So I'm just going to go through my story kind of quickly. I've been on a journey that I did not do on purpose. It just kind of happened, and it's kind of overwhelming when I look back. I've been on shows like Good Morning America, The Today Show. I've been on ESP Magazine, People Magazine, Runner's World, and it's been super, super crazy. And honestly, this is my 7th presentation today, so I'm super tired. And there is a reason why I do these, and I can tell you, I promise you, this is not for money, because I got paid exactly $0 to do 6 presentations. I do this because what happened to me is out there for anyone. There's no special secrets. There's no, it's nothing magical. I didn't have willpower. Basically, I just got educated on what real food is. And if it's out there for anyone, and that's why I do this, because I know what happened to me is totally 100% repeatable. In fact, Channel 7 News one time coined me as saying, I'm just a fat guy that ate a bunch of apples. And there we go. I got a little bit of lag on this end. And I believe that. And that's why I do what I do. And I know that's why Heather does what she does, because this is out there for anyone. So I'm going to take you for a real quick walk through my story. I grew up, this is my high school sweetheart, and we've been married actually almost 26 years in August. And so we met at a super early age. We still kind of argue about when it was. I think it was 8th or 9th grade. We'll leave it at that. And I used to just put this picture in my high school talks because I would tell the kids that we were the same people, only I was a little bit cooler because I had a really good mullet going on in that picture. So, but I grew up in Alden. We still live in Alden. It's kind of a rural community, a lot of farming, a very farm-rich community, a lot of like open woods, and we love it here. And so, like most kids, I grew up on a farm. I worked on a farm as I went to school. And I noticed working on the farm, I was always twisting my ankles and kind of getting hurt. I almost felt like I was like accident prone. And as I got older, Heather and I wanted to start a family. So probably in my late teens, I got a job in industry in a factory. And I started using a crane that was over my head. And every time I'd go to reach up for the crane, my shoulder would dislocate. And it got to the point where just sneezing, actually, it would come out of the joint. So I went to the doctor, and he did a few tests, did an MRI on me. And he said, we have to do something called an arthroplasty on your shoulder. And basically what they do is they pull all the tendons and ligaments up. They kind of fold them over and then stitch them up to kind of tighten up all the cords in there. And so I went in for surgery. And when they got in there, they realized that they kept stretching stuff, and it just kept stretching and stretching and stretching like bubble gum. So they did the best they could to patch me up, and they said there's something more going on than just a bad shoulder, and I was diagnosed with a disease called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And basically what that means is all the glue or the collagen in my body that holds my joints together is very elastic. So that's why I was always dislocating and spraining things. And looking back, we go back and talk to the doctor about this. And he said that even in my mid-20s, every time he saw me not in a wheelchair when I came in the office, he considered that like really successful. When I was younger, all the dislocations and subluxations didn't kind of bother me that much. But as I got older into my mid-20s, the cartilage started wearing away from my joints, and it caused a good amount of pain, and it was chronic pain, and I had, from the time I woke up in the morning until I went to bed. And one of the things that happened when I left the hospital was that I was prescribed a bottle of Lortab, and I had never been on painkillers before, but I can remember taking them for the first time, and they were super, super effective. It was probably the first time in my life that actually the edge was taken off of my pain, and they were really effective, so I just kept taking them. And then, like all narcotics, I kind of built up a tolerance, and I started taking more of them, and we kept upping the dosage. And I worked my way up from Lortab to Percocets to Oxys, and finally the doctor said, that was kind of the limit, and the doctor said, we're going to try to put you on another prescription called fentanyl. And back then, we didn't know what fentanyl was. It wasn't a thing like it is today. And so I went on fentanyl, but at the same time, we kept me on the other opioids for breakthrough medicine, or like he would say, to stay ahead of the pain. And this was a recipe to make an addict really, really fast. The fentanyl was like a constant drip, so I always had it in my system. It was never, not there. But still, after I worked my way up through that, I was still having trouble sleeping. And if you've ever not sleeping for a couple nights, you get a little tired, a little grumpy. But I hadn't slept sometimes 5-6 nights in a row, and I just wanted to fall asleep at night. So on the way home from work, I stopped and picked up a bottle of vodka. And that night, I drank half of a 1.75 liter bottle. I passed out on my bed. And I feel like I was almost an instant alcoholic after that. It was pretty weird thing, because we didn't drink growing up in my family. I never went really partying as a kid, because we got married so young that I kind of missed all that stuff. So I definitely wasn't drinking for social reasons or anything. I was drinking just so I could pass out at night. And it sounds it's almost embarrassing to talk about this, but along with those three things that I used to escape reality and escape pain, I also found something that had almost the same effect as an opioid, was fast food and hyper-processed food. And actually, this picture down at the bottom right, this is a typical day of what I would eat. I would stop for fast food in the morning. I would eat fast food for lunch, and then we'd actually order pizza and wings. And while I'm driving home, I would stop at Burger King and pick a couple things off the dollar menu. And as we got more busy raising kids, our menu got worse and worse and worse, to the point where we hardly ever even ate at home, something that we made at home. And as a result of all these things, probably at my worst, I was on the max dose of fentanyl. I was drinking a liter of vodka right before I went to sleep at night, and it was nothing for me to take 15 to 20 painkillers all at the same time. And you can imagine, as a result, my life was spiraling out of control. And by the time I had reached 38, I was over 400 pounds. We didn't know how much over 400 pounds, because the doctors literally couldn't weigh me on their scales anymore. And I was super sick, and with this joint disease, I was just about immobile. I was having trouble just, getting to the bathroom and stuff. I could still work. I was a functioning alcoholic and addict, but that was about the limit of my days just getting into to teach. And it's easy for me to show you these pictures and explain what it's like to weigh 400, because I can just tell you to put the balance of 400 pounds on your back and try to walk upstairs or pick up keys. But one of the things that's really hard for me to convey to people is how much emotional baggage was on me. Being a young guy, wanting to take care of Heather and protect and provide for her, I physically couldn't do it. And there were times I remember she'd be out mowing the lawn while she's trying to chase 2 kids around, and I'm sitting in a recliner with my feet up. Simple things like, when my daughter was a toddler, she would take off running, and I physically couldn't grab her to catch her, to get her out of harm's way. And that stuff is super hard to deal with, the emotional weight of this. And I think in the beginning, all the addiction stuff really did come from pain that was physical, but I don't think it took real long to be an emotional thing as well. Um, so people look at me now and they say, well, what happened? What was that big, like, magic aha moment or that switch that flipped? And honestly, there really wasn't one, but there was a series of events that happened that kind of tipped over like dominoes. And the first one was Heather's mom. Since we were growing up together, we were at each other's houses all the time. And her mom was kind of like a second mom to me. And she hadn't been feeling well. We finally convinced her to go to the doctor to get checked out. We thought she had like a cold or flu kind of thing. And she went to the doctor, and it seemed like immediately our life got flipped upside down with her diagnosis of leukemia. And just like that, she was like swept away to a cancer hospital called Roswell here. And I think that was my first taste of reality, actually going into Roswell. And there were a lot of things that went off in my head, but probably one of the most critical things that happened for me is her mom was really, really sick, really tired. She was basically trying to get from transfusion to transfusion. And one day I walked up to see her, and she opened her eyes real slowly, and she said, "How's your knee?" And I remember that just absolutely crushed me, because here she's struggling to try to live one more day, and she's worried about my knee. I mean, it shows you what kind of person she is, but I walked out that day feeling like such an idiot, because my entire life I had focused on what was wrong with me, what I wanted that I didn't have, but I never stopped to realize that there are people that would do anything to jump into my body and have what I have. And when I walked out that night, I realized that there was a lot of people that would never walk out of that hospital. And I started being grateful. I started finding gratitude and kind of shifting my perspective. And as we were dealing with her mom, we got a phone call that my dad, my best friend in the entire world, he was everything to me. We were best buddies. He taught me everything. We hunted together, fished together. He had like a cold kind of flu thing, and we really thought he had pneumonia. And he went in and got a chest x-ray, and he was diagnosed with kidney cancer that had metastasized to his entire body. And the doctor gave him 6 months to live. And my father didn't make it 6 months. He lived 6 weeks to the day of his diagnosis, and he lost his battle. And shortly after that, Heather's mom lost her battle that went from leukemia to lymphoma and then to a brain tumor. And, she just fought to the end to just try to hang on to life. And those two things, as you can imagine, flipped our world upside down. It was very painful, and even these years later, it's still such a raw. I mean, I've talked about this like I say 6 times today, and I'm still get emotional every time I tell it. And we're trying to get things back to kind of normal. Try to get the kids back to their sports practices and kind of get some kind of routine going. And I think another domino that tipped for me, one day Heather was putting my socks and shoes on at the table, and it just became a thing. It just, the first couple of times it was really hard to get through, but it just kind of became the thing that she will put my socks and shoes on me. And I remember this day, our eyes kind of met, and I thought, I'm next. Like, I'm the next one that she's going to have to bury. And, if I did make it through the year, what was next year going to look like when I'm not even 40 years old yet and I can't dress myself? Like, how is she going to take care of me? And honestly, the only thing I could think of is trying to put space between these funerals so she wouldn't have to do this while it's all so raw and fresh. So I decided I had to at least try something. And so I went on YouTube and I started looking at stuff, and I found this thing called the bariatric surgery. And basically, these people were having amazing success. They weighed just as much as me. And within a year, they were like running marathons. And I'm like, this is the answer I've been looking for. So I got everything set up. I went to all the meetings, and I had one thing left to do. I just had to get my primary doctor to sign off on it, and it was supposed to be a rubber stamp. And when I went in there that day, they took my blood pressure, and I was on 2 different blood pressure medicines at the time, a calcium channel blocker and a beta blocker. and my blood pressure was 255 or 215 over 155. I have that backwards, I think. And what really freaked him out is my resting heart rate was 125. And he wanted to call 911, like right there. And I kind of convinced him that we just had to wait a little bit and let me relax. And so he saw a couple other patients. My heart rate did come down. But basically, he told me he signed off for every one of these, but he wouldn't sign off for me because I was just too sick. And he was also worried about what the anesthesia would do from all the narcotics I was on. So basically, I went home that night, and I thought my life was completely over. Like, I thought, actually, of course, I'm going to blame my doctor. My doctor, like, killed me that night. But when I went to bed that night, I couldn't stop thinking about, you know, my two favorite people in the entire world just clinging to life, just trying to live one more day. Not in a selfish way, but just to hang on so they could spend one more day with their family. And so I decided, you know, if I can't do it that way, I'm going to have to do what I can to change what I can. In my whole life, I had prayed for these big miracles. You know, I'd pray to get off opioids or to not drink anymore, or get new knees. But I felt like this time was different because I prayed for all these mountains. But what I realized is while I was praying for mountains to be moved, I was leaning on the shovel the whole time. And I needed to get to work. Instead of praying for miracles, I needed to be thankful for what I was already given. So I did what I think a lot of Americans do. I started restricting calories. I started swapping out red meat for turkey and stuff. And at 400 pounds, I lost weight. I think pretty much anything change that you make at 400 pounds, you're going to see results. But I still felt like garbage. I was still on a ton of medicine, sometimes upwards to 20 prescriptions in a month. But I was sitting watching Netflix one night, and this title popped up in my queue, and it said Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. And I didn't really care what the film was about. I just knew that that title described me. So I turned it on, and it's a really inspiring film about Joe Cross coming to the U.S., and he consumes nothing but vegetable and fruit juice out of his juice machine. And over 60 days, he loses almost 60 pounds, gets off all his medicine, and gets really super healthy. And by the time the credits rolled at the end, I had already ordered my juicer. And I'm going to be honest with you, I had no clue what I was getting into. I grew up in farm country. We raised most of our own animals. I grew up hunting and fishing and processing meat. There were some weekends that we would process 300 pounds or more meat and smoke it. And so I tell people that if Joe would have been putting raccoon poop in that juice machine, I'd be eating raccoon poop today, because it made no difference to me what he was putting in. I just wanted the results that he got. So January 1st was right around the corner, and that'll be about 6.5 years ago. And I decided to try a 30-day juice fast. And the first time I made juice, I went to the store, bought my little bag of vegetables, put them through the juicer, and I got about 3 spoonfuls of juice. And I'm like, this isn't going to work like this. So the one thing that juicing did for me was it taught us how to shop. We found produce companies, and, you know, here I am, you know, the mighty hunter, and I'm yelling across the store, waving kale up in the air, telling Heather that's only 99 cents. So it really got us, you know, into farmers markets and places we could get produce at a reasonable price. But the other thing that the juicing did for me is the first 3 days were a little crazy. But after my body got used to it, by the 4th day, you know, I started waking up a little earlier. And by the 5th day, I actually woke up in the same position that I fell asleep. And that might not sound like a big deal, but that was all I wanted. I just wanted to be able to sleep through the night. And that was like a miracle in itself that I got a good night's sleep. And every day, you know, one other thing would happen. I'm like, whoa, I can't believe it. I forgot to take my Indocin, or, you know, I actually didn't want to sit around anymore. But because I watched that, I got to the end of my juice fast, and I knew it wasn't sustainable. I knew I couldn't juice the rest of my life. But because I watched that, a whole bunch of other stuff started showing up in my queue. And the next film that I watched was Forks Over Knives. And I tell people that Forks Over Knives didn't just save my life. It literally gave me a completely new one. And if you can imagine how frustrated I was having my two favorite people on the planet lose their life to cancer, while Dr. Campbell's on there turning cancer on and off just by a simple experiment by using milk protein or dairy protein. But really what I learned from it is I could eat what I was juicing and add some whole grains and add some legumes and some starches. And basically I had the perfect diet. So that's what I did. And the more I learned, the more things kind of made sense to me. And the more things like, you know, how they would feed the birds, like all they wanted outside. And I noticed the birds could eat all day. They weren't portion controlled. And I didn't have one fat bird that couldn't fly in my backyard. You know, the deer across the street, 650 acres of corn, they eat all day as much as they want. And I never saw a deer with a muffin top. Same with fish, all the lakes that we fish in, there's a constant supply of feeder fish, but I never caught a fish that had cankles before. And so it kind of made sense that maybe it wasn't how much I was eating. I just wasn't eating the food that was designed for me. But then, of course, I would get some backlash after I got into this because people say you have to have meat because you need your protein. But the reality was that some of the biggest, strongest mammals on the planet were herbivores, and they got their protein through plants or actually through amino acids. The other thing was the dairy. You know, people said that, well, you know, you need dairy for calcium for strong bones. But when you think about it, it is kind of weird. I grew up on a dairy farm and I never stopped to think, why do we consume dairy or drink milk after we're weaned? And not only that, why do we drink it from another species? I mean, who picked a cow? So I like to say in my high school talks, you know, no one would think it's weird if I went in my backyard and picked a carrot and started eating it out of the garden. Because I'm back there with what I've biologically been given with no technology. It's not weird. But if I ever wanted to drink milk in my backyard, this is what it would look like. It is very weird. Someone would probably call the police on me. But this stuff started making sense, and I started learning more. And the more I learned, the more results I would get, and the results kind of just snowballed into this thing. And this is, I love telling people about this story. Heather came in the door, and it was kind of like this time of year. She came in the door, and it was a nice day, and she goes, "Do you want to go for a walk?" And I said, "What did you do to the car? Because why would you walk when we have a perfectly good vehicle in the driveway?" So she wanted to walk to go get some air. And so we set out to do this 1.5 mile walk. I made it not even halfway. And I sat down on this rock, and she and the kids had to come pick me up because I couldn't go anymore. But something inside me wanted to go back and finish that walk. So I did, and I kept walking every weekend. That was my thing. I'd go hiking, and then I'd bring the family to the places I was hiking. And I felt really, really good because for the first time, instead of being on the sidelines when my kids were playing sports and stuff, I could actually be involved and go on walks and hikes and explore. And then one day my cousin came back from the Adirondack Mountains, and he showed me some pictures at the summit. And I told him that I wanted to climb a mountain in a year. And so to do that, I had to get some new braces made up. But I worked a whole year just climbing stairs. And in 2012, I summited my first mountain. And it was another one of those dominoes because I was supposed to be in a wheelchair, and here I'm climbing mountains. And I got stronger, and I bring my family back. And to this day, it's one of our favorite places on the planet. Then we ran a Tough Mudder together, and that was super fun. Only when we were training, I asked Heather, I said, "I think we could run a 5K. I felt really good." And she says, "We don't run." And she said, "Isn't a 5K like longer than a marathon?" And I'm like, "I think we should at least give it a whirl." And to this day, this has been the favorite finish line I've ever crossed. It was our first 5K together. We actually got so emotional at the end of this that people thought we got like really bad news when we were out on the course. And as we're driving home that night, I kind of gave Heather a nudge, and I'm like, "Do you want to try a 10K? And she goes, "Are you nuts? We almost died doing that. We can't double it." And about 2 months later, we ran our first 10K together. and it was super special because it was for Roswell and hospice, who were really close to our heart. And then I asked Heather on the way home from that, I'm like, how about a half marathon? That seems like a logical step. And she said, nope, I'm out. That's it. We're done. But I noticed my handicap parking pass expired in September, which happened to be the same month as our race, the Mighty Niagara. And so I decided to try to run this half marathon. I knew it would be super hard. So I took a picture of her mom and my dad, and I had a friend that was struggling with throat cancer. And I taped their pictures on my handicap pass that was still valid. And I ran 13.1 miles with that pass hanging around my waist. And that was another one of those dominoes that tipped for me. And then I found out people do these really long bike rides. So I signed up for my first 100-mile bike ride, and then I ordered a bike, put it together. In August 2015, I did my first Century ride. It was a long day. And what I found out is the way I was eating on this plant-based lifestyle, the way I was eating was driving the inflammation out of my body, which was my biggest problem. And I was moving, so I was getting rid of the atrophy, which was my second biggest problem. And what was happening is the stronger my muscles were getting, they were actually taking over where my joints were not so strong. So it was this recipe to actually heal my whole body. I'll never get rid of Ehlers-Danlos, but I can make the symptoms be drastically improved. Then I ran a marathon, which was a cool day. At mile 18, I honestly wanted to quit, and Heather dropped her bag. She met me, to cheer me on, and she actually dropped her bag at mile 18 and finished the marathon with me, and it was super, super cool. Last summer, I got a chance to compete in Ironman 70.3 in Ohio, and that was a really special day. And then this past summer, probably maybe my second most favorite finish line is I got to compete at Lake Placid half Ironman, and it was a super, super special day. And this stuff is all cool, and we have like trophies, and we're in films, as you saw. And that stuff is super, super cool. And that's the stuff what gets me, to talk to people and stuff. But honestly, that stuff is all kind of meaningless compared to the stuff I want to talk to you about now. I told you guys about that first walk I took with my kids. And I failed, or what we call in the race world, I DNF'd. I did not finish. And the next time that we got together on a trail, it was a little different scenario this time, because my kids and Heather actually became my pacers for my first 50-mile ultra marathon. And the cool thing was they got to help me finish. And instead of seeing that sympathy in their eyes for me, I got to see the pride and how proud they were of me finishing a 50-mile marathon. I told you guys how Heather used to put my socks and shoes on. I finally got to return the favor one time to her because she was struggling to put her backpack on, and I was able to help her. Only this time we were 6,700 feet in the air because we just summited Mount Washington together. I told you guys she thought I was crazy for running a half marathon, but actually I was able to pace her for her first half marathon. And honestly, I've never been able to catch her again because she's so stinking fast. And it's just so cool to watch how this whole thing unfolds. She's done a bunch of marathons. She's done ultra marathons, which indeed are longer than a marathon. We get to enjoy races all over the place. We race at Leadville, which is 13,000 feet in the air. And not once did she worry about if I was breathing or not, like she used to when I had sleep apnea so bad. And that's the stuff that I like. The other thing is I get to share my story all over the place, all different. I just did like 6 high school talks today about addiction and recovery and plant-based nutrition, which is a super big honor. Medically, my cholesterol was always over 300 on Lipitor, and actually the 117 is a little bit high. I'm down to 112. I just didn't update it yet. My triglycerides were 259 in 2009. And now they're down to 74. This to me is kind of mind-blowing. Pharmaceuticals alone, my insurance company in 2009 paid almost $20,000 just for prescription drugs. In the past 2 years combined, they spend $120, and that's for a B12 supplement. And if you can just imagine, like, all I did was learn how to eat. We don't really need to have a healthcare crisis. If we could do this and it's repeatable, I mean, imagine what this would do to the economy. The fentanyl, the alcohol, the food, all that stuff is not only gone, but it's replaced with me teaching other people how to do this. And that's the stuff that's cool for me. Here's some statistics. I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't know. We have a problem in the U.S. Obesity is growing at an alarming rate. In fact, the statistics are always changing. I honestly can't keep up with them. But only 30% of the population is actually at a healthy weight. It's costing over $300 billion, which is, again, going up. And when I wrote this statistic down that 70% of Americans are on a prescription drug, I thought that was a little skewed. But then I started thinking about it. Yeah, if I think of 10 adults that I know, yeah, 7 of them for sure are on prescription drugs. 2 or more of them half of them are on 2 or more. Heart disease, stroke, cancer, certain kinds of cancer, lung disease, high blood pressure, liver disease. We don't like this. The CDC already recognizes these as lifestyle diseases. We're getting heavier, sicker, less mobile. But here's the weird thing. We're putting more and more money into this situation. And I teach engineering and technology. And to see the changes that are happening in the medical field, we're doing surgeries with robots. We're doing remote surgeries from other countries. When my dad got his first kidney out, they basically cut him in half. They cut him from his belly button to his spine. And now when you get a kidney removed, it's just a small incision. This technology is advancing so much, but statistically, we're getting sicker and sicker. So you would kind of want to know why. And I'm not a scientist or a researcher or a doctor, but I honestly think that we need to stop looking for a cure for this stuff and start looking at the cause. And personally, I believe that cause is right on our plates. I went after this for health reasons, but as my journey goes on, I'm starting to see all the other positive impacts it has on the environment, the animals, and the economy. And I'm going to let Heather take over from here.
Hi, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I just wanted to talk to you and give you a little bit of my story. Me and Tim, as he said, we started dating early and we got married very early. And our form of entertainment was always going out to eat, going to the movies, getting big buckets of popcorn. And we got married very young, and I had my son right away and had gained over 70 pounds with my son. And I tried to lose some of the weight just like everybody else does, with just cutting calories and doing all the different plans out there. And so I lost some weight, and then I got pregnant with my daughter and gained some more weight. I still did not lose the weight for my son, so I started walking with the kids. I tried to, same thing, tried to do what everybody does, and I'd lose a little weight here and there. Tim started his journey, and when he started it, I was not on board right away. Me and the kids were eating our pizza and wings. I wasn't sure where he would go with it. And sorry. And so we started tasting his food, but I still hadn't, jumped on board. We started like doing a veggie pizza or some more salads, and I did some walking, but nothing real, I didn't do much exercise. And one day me and Tim were walking through the mall, and I had a cramp in my side, and I kind of didn't think anything of it, but it kind of kept coming and going, and I ended up going to the doctor a couple months later, to my gynecologist, and he said that I had a fibroid the size of a softball. And I asked him if it was non-cancerous, and he said they usually aren't. And I said, okay, well, let's just leave it and keep an eye on it, because I didn't want to have any type of surgery. And a few months later, I ended up going to my primary doctor, and he had asked about it. And I said, oh yeah, we're just watching it. And he was concerned and wanted to make sure it wasn't pushing on any of my other organs. And so I got the CAT scan. It came back that it was now the size of a grapefruit, and it was pushing on the right ureter to my right kidney. And so that night, it brought back, the night of the surgery, I ended up having to have a total hysterectomy. And that brought back all the things my mom had gone through and the procedures and biopsies. And the next morning when Tim came in, I said to him, I want to eat whole food, plant-based. I want to be healthy. I want to do whatever I can do to keep myself out of here. And so I just started focusing on my health, and I just started eating healthy and moving. I didn't want to focus on the scale. It's always just been about health. And you do realize you're losing weight, but my main focus has always been just is just to be healthy. And I started to get more active. Like I said, I had to walk, and we started doing some hiking. And then I got into running, and I found that I really enjoyed it, and that I could even be outside in the winter here. I usually was bundled up in the winter, but now I go outside when I can. And I also found that I have a competitive side of me, and I love running. I love being out there. I love being healthy. And we go on all kinds of different adventures, and what we put into our body either fuels us for good or harms us, and I hope that you choose good. Thank you.
So I usually end up my presentation. That was great, by the way. Thank you. I usually end my presentations by asking people a question, and the question is, if a whole food plant-based diet can take a 400-pound addict that actually didn't know if he was going to wake up in the morning, and honestly didn't know if I really cared, and can turn him into someone that loves life and is happy and fit and healthy, the question is, what can it do for you? Thank you guys so much for listening.
You've shared so much, I don't know what there is left to ask. But if you were to be able to go back from the very beginning, each of you, I know you started at different times, if you could have done one thing different, is there anything that you would have done differently?
I would have started sooner.
I think all of us say that. Kathy and I talk about the fact that why didn't I know this 20 years ago? Yeah. But yeah, just starting sooner.
I wish I would have started sooner, and I wish I would have known this for my kids. I tell them today, I would send them out for breakfast with a package of Pop-Tarts, the worst stuff you could give them. And I say, I wish I would have known this stuff, and I would have had you guys eating healthier back then.
Yeah, I always say when you know better, you do better.
Yeah, and I think I don't believe in coincidence, but it's kind of good. Like I tell people, there's so many more tools and stuff out there available than when I started. And maybe there were tools that I just didn't know about, but basically I had to film Forks Over Knives. That was my main information. And it's probably good that I wasn't overloaded on information, because I would find, something to fix and fix it, rather than having, 20 different groups screaming at me for what I'm doing wrong. I just kind of, as I'd learn, I would just change. And so even though I flipped a switch kind of to give up the meat and dairy, it took a little while, to phase out the oil and, learning, the processed foods and that kind of stuff. But it might have been the best thing, because I might have been afraid looking back.
It becomes too big if you have too much at one time. Yeah, that's
right.
True. Okay, we have one more question.
Hello, Tim, both of you. Thank you. A lot of the people who hear on television that you mentioned, the Atkins diet, the keto diet, and there's just so much on television, and people feel that they can eat the meat and all that. But I read somewhere where it does affect the people with maybe type 2 diabetes, but they do lose weight and they look wonderful. So how do you talk with your friends who and get them to really want to be in the whole food plant-based?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of ways to lose weight fast. Chemotherapy, you can get parts amputated, you can get sick, you can become an addict. I'm not doubting that you lose weight on ketosis, like a keto diet. But I almost hate even like arguing people about it, because everyone knows that broccoli is more healthy than bacon, and they're actually just looking for an excuse that they can eat all that crappy stuff. And then they see they're losing weight. And so as a result of losing weight, there's no doubt some of their metabolic markers temporarily are coming down. But what they're seeing is a very temporary change, and it's going to catch up to them. And they have to know in their mind that it's going to catch up to them eating bacon all the time. They have to know that.
We had one of our members before we started your program that shared about the 90-some pounds that she lost. Similar story. She found out she had rheumatoid arthritis as young, and did the whole thing. And she's here. She wants to chat with you, and we have a little surprise for you. Her name is Jenny.
Jenny, I know I wrote Jenny's name down because I couldn't wait to congratulate her.
Hi.
Hi, congratulations.
Thank you. I did actually have a question for you. Your kids, did they like jump on board with the eating whole food plant-based, or was that a struggle with them, or how did that go for your family?
Well, our son's 25, and he has been out of the house for a few years now. So, we didn't start this till later on. But he is now vegan, and he's, kind of careful as to the processed stuff, but he's a lot more whole food and together vegan. So that's one thing that I'm happy about with him. And our daughter lives at home. She's 22, and she eats what we have here, or she has to get her own stuff. And the thing is, I don't force it on her, but when she does go out with friends, sometimes she'll pick good choices, other times she won't. And sometimes she'll come in with something, and I just don't say anything, because she'll say, I know what you're going to say already, and I'm like, I didn't say anything. So she's getting there. I'd say she's probably 95%.
If I can add on, this is kind of funny. It's kind of a good point. So my son, he's super rebellious, and he's a 25-year-old kid, but he moved out years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago. So he would never go plant-based because mom and dad do that, right? So he went vegan. And the funny thing is, he eats a lot more processed food, or he did. And then all of a sudden, I noticed his food was changing to more beans, rice, and potatoes. And I'm like, oh, what's going on? Well, the reason why he does that is because that's what he can afford. So it just goes to show you that this does not have to be expensive. He's a poor college kid, and it just so happens that eating rice and beans and frozen vegetables happens to be the cheapest. And we bought him a little tiny 4-quart Instapot.
For Christmas.
Yeah, so he won't tell you he's plant-based, so he's a poor vegan, which means he's plant-based.
That's good. Well, okay, so can you see me? Can you see this?
I can.
All right, so we have a shirt for you that we're going to send.
Oh, cool.
And it's got a quote from you. All you got to do is a little more than you did yesterday with the running vegetables on it, if y'all can see that. So, because we really want to thank you for taking the time to speak. You have a very, very inspiring story, both of you do. And it's wonderful that you're getting out there. I loved hearing that you're still getting out there and talking to kids too, and teenagers, and teaching them. And that's just, it's amazing what you're doing. So thank you so much. And thank you for checking in with us here, because this was an awesome thing to see and hear your story. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
If you could give me your mailing address, then we'll put those shirts in the mail to you probably early next week.
Thank you so much. That was so cool. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you guys. You really do have an inspiring story. I love watching you on Facebook and your Fat Man rants. It's all great. We shared one of your recipes. We have a recipe club too, so we shared your cauliflower wings recipe. So I'm sure some people are gonna make that, and we'll probably share more of your recipes in the future, because they're so easy and they're so good. I love your potato salad. My
Oh,
husband,
yeah.
Very good.
potato salad should be in the house at all times. Anything else you want to share with us before we say goodbye?
Well, I suppose we should share. Eat plants.
Move your body.
All you got to do is a little more than you did yesterday. You guys have a great night.
Perfect.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Yeah.